Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Short Podcast. I'm your host, Ross Baxter, and today's is episode 9 of the series. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. And today we've got an awesome guest for you. We've got my friend and artist Daniel Conner coming on. How's it going, Daniel?
It's going good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming on. It really means a lot. The podcast
No problem at all.
It's growing. We're getting there. We're slowly getting there.
Sounds good.
So, before I get into the main topics and so forth when it comes to the Shunard podcast, we always pretty much talk about the artists themselves. Just get a wee bit of background about Daniel. So, Daniel is, I guess, a 3D generalist. That's probably the best way to describe you, Dan.
I kind of started off as kind of modeler and texture, but over the years it's kind of grown into becoming more of a generalist, yeah.
Awesome. So, as always, to anyone who's, I guess, a new listener, or you've been listening for a while now, for the Shooter podcast, what we always do is basically we get a breakdown of Daniel's background and so forth, and then later on we bring in certain main questions and topics related to student education, and we also cover, I guess, some of the more general ones, and such as software. But I think maybe today I might change a wee bit in regards to the software, because I think it's very common. But let's just get straight into it. So just tell us a wee bit about yourself, Daniel, and what do you do, where you work, and so forth.
Cool. So yes, I'm a freelance 3D generalist. I studied animation at college, and then after college, I decided to try and find work in industry, and I found my way to interference pattern as a freelancer. Although I'm freelance, I do about 95% of my work is through interference pattern. So we do kind of models for ads and kind of films. We do a mixture of stuff, VR stuff we're doing lately as well, and some ArchViz. So there's quite a good mix of projects we get there.
Awesome. Very cool. So how long would you say you've been doing 3D for?
So I went to college, started that in 2012, graduated in 2014, and then I got my first job in a studio was April 2015. So I've been there coming up for just over 4 years.
Gee whiz. Oh yeah, of course, because so when it comes to obviously you as an artist, obviously there's, I guess, one of the main questions. Obviously, there's like portfolio and so forth. There's software and stuff. But I think to start off today's podcast in terms of topics wise, I think we'll just start with the basic one in terms of I guess pipeline, if that's okay.
Okay.
I guess in regards to maybe what you do a wee bit, just it doesn't have to be in serious depth. Just I guess just a brief overview in terms of what do you do, in terms of your main skill set.
So I think myself, my main skill set I think is modeling and texturing. So that's kind of props and environments, not so much characters, and UVing and texturing, Substance Painter, Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
So I also doing a little bit of lighting as well. We did a lighting on a project last year, so that was learning a whole new pipeline because we were doing new software. We're using Houdini for that, so it was learning a whole new way of working compared to how we normally work in Maya.
Yeah, of course. That's always a fun one when it comes to. But it's also a scary one as well when it comes to software. Especially when you're getting thrown into the deep end. For example, I really want to learn Houdini someday, and Houdini and Nuke is two softwares I really love to start dwelling into. I'm not sure what you think, but do you think they're mainly because obviously you focus on advertising and shorts and so forth. Do you think that stuff's mainly for those type of things in terms of the software, like Houdini and Nuke is kind of for that, or do you think that's used for games a lot as well? Because I'm no expert yet.
I think Houdini's kind of fast becoming one of the industry standard for kind of lighting and rendering, but I think it gets most used as well for like particle effects and simulations and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, of course. I completely forgot about that. Wait, is that's Houdini? That's not Nuke, yeah?
Yeah, Houdini. Nuke's kind of compositing, so kind of all of our rendered shots that we do, they go through Nuke for their compositing pass.
So it's sort of like After Effects in a way, or is it
like After Effects but on steroids?
Right. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, because I really
I don't pretend to understand it. I've seen people's screens with Nuke on it, and they've got all these nodes connected to everything. I just don't pretend. It's just magic. I just don't pretend to understand it.
Yeah, that's I guess one of the main discussions a lot of people have been having in the last, I'd probably say in the last maybe 3 to 4 years. Obviously with the such constant growth with Substance Painter and Substance Designer, the whole idea of nodes coming into play through Designer, and then obviously with Houdini, or is it Nuke you were saying? Yeah. Nuke, it's Houdini doesn't use nodes, do they?
Houdini is a node-based software, yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
I think it's just down to, like, that's obviously another area a lot of artists maybe have to start, I guess, maybe exploring or dwelling into. But then again, I think Substance Painter, when it comes to texturing, is still kind of the go-to. Like, there's not really a requirement yet, I don't think, or I don't believe, in terms of industry standard for a designer just yet. So I think it's just down to, because obviously, like, we always talk about software and stuff, but when it comes to, like, these other softwares, it's also nice to try something new and explore, just explore your creativity.
Yeah, well, Houdini was totally different to anything I'd ever used before. Like, when you compare it to Maya, I found it very different.
And just in general, or just like small scale, or just overall?
Just overall, how the software works. It's
right.
Getting your head around it. I would never try and model anything in Houdini. I think that would just be a nightmare. For me personally.
You can model in Houdini. That's the thing. Right, I didn't know that.
You can do stuff with it. It's very, the way the nodes work, it's quite good. It's very non-destructive, so you can go back and change stuff.
Okay.
But I don't really think it's designed for the same kind of poly modeling that Maya is.
That's the thing. Is like, because, well, I don't know. It's a very debatable question, because obviously everyone always uses Maya, 3ds Max, and then one of the other things I was kind of getting introduced to in one of the previous podcasts was from a guy called John Griffiths. I'm trying to think, what was the software he used? It was, God, I'm trying to remember. It's like, but basically it's like all these software, they're all pretty similar, but I think it's just because Maya and 3ds Max have been on the top for so long that it's just naturally people are afraid to dwell into these smaller, I guess, companies and softwares. So I think it's, I guess, like I said, not trying to repeat myself, but it's down to trying to find the software that suits your needs, because we've got to a point in the industry that people require you to know certain software sometimes, but now I think it's getting more into a trend of just showing that you can do the work. Yeah.
With a lot of different software, when you're switching between like 3ds Max and Maya, the techniques are the same. It's just a case of finding where the different buttons are.
Yeah, because, like, for example, when I first came to Edinburgh College, when I first met you and I first met Ian, so our lecturer called Ian MacArthur, hopefully we'll also be getting him in the podcast in the future.
Ian's good. I like Ian.
Ian's awesome. You can't deny how supportive he's been to, like, if anyone who's obviously not heard of Ian, Ian's been teaching for years in the creative industries, and he's pretty much helped me and Daniel a lot over the years.
A lot, yes,
and,
very much so.
Obviously, when I was in Edinburgh, I was kind of mainly introduced into Maya there because of both Ian and Daniel, and Daniel's taught me a lot about Maya over the years, and I'm very grateful. And it's down to, I guess, like, for example, I transitioned from 3ds Max to Maya, and obviously there's different workflows and stuff, but they are similar. But I'm not sure if there's anything that you've, since you started working in the industry, has there been anything, I guess, any major difference in terms of, like, the pipeline to what you expected? Like, or do you think when you were out of uni, you were like, okay, I know the gist of everything, and I kind of know where I'm expected to be?
Well, I guess throughout college, they kind of tell you what the industry will be like, and they warn you about working fast and, tight deadlines and time is money and all that. But I think you can't really know for sure yourself until you're actually in a studio, and every studio has their own sort of, like, different pipelines in the way they do stuff. I think that kind of thing comes with the experience of going out there and doing it.
Okay.
Because my first day in a job at a studio, it was a real eye opener for me, just how fast you're expected to work compared to doing stuff in a college.
Yeah.
Because, you look around and you see everyone's blazing through it and going really fast, and it kind of makes you very self-conscious about the speed of your work compared to when you're doing it in college.
So, like, obviously there's a few things that we've discussed just through general conversations and stuff. I think one of the main things, like you're saying, is like, obviously, like you're saying, deadlines.
Yes.
And I think obviously since you're starting out as a student, so obviously this podcast is based around mainly student education, but like anyone who's wanting to get into art, I guess one of the great topics to discuss is about, I guess, understanding time. And one of my main issues, I'll be like completely open to say it, is when you're being so precious with your work. Obviously, like, I always think you should spend as much time as you want on the art that you want to make. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to the idea of getting a job and being realistic, you have to be able to acknowledge the fact that there's deadlines to be made, and you're not going to be. It's not all in your control. You're now part of a team and stuff. So maybe if you want to talk about, obviously I know you're limited to what you can say and so forth, but like, is there any tips when it comes to, I guess, being ready for that, and I guess how to prepare yourself in terms of what to expect, if that makes sense?
I think it's one of those things that kind of just comes with experience, isn't it? When you see how a project runs from start to finish, you get an idea of how fast you need to do certain things.
Okay.
It gets broken into milestones for stuff. Like if we're doing an asset build for an environment, they would say like have a set number of days to do the initial blocking out, and then like that goes to client for approval, and then when that's approved, you then have a set number of days to fill in all the details and start detailing it up and finishing off the model, and then that gets approved or changes get made, and then there's another block of time allocated for UVing, and then some time allocated for texturing.
And then like on top of that, because obviously I think it always depends also on like studio size and stuff, and like that can play a major part in terms of who gets what and how things are divided overall, I guess.
So when I've worked at when I've done work at Interference Pattern, it's a fairly small studio, so everyone kind of does a little bit of everything. So sometimes you'll be doing some modeling, and then you'll be going on to doing UVing, or then if another environment is being worked on, maybe you'll go across to that one to help out to get that one through. And then back to other ones, which I think I quite like, because that kind of small studio, I quite like being able to do a variety of stuff.
Definitely.
Instead of a really, really large one where you're solely doing one thing for months on end. I've heard stories about studios where, someone's for 18 months has just been able to model window frames for that time instead of doing something else.
Ouch. Yeah, I've heard many similar stories as well. It's not what you want to be doing, I guess, for your time anyway, especially when it comes to like it's crazy to believe that, like, I obviously understand that these like certain studios, like, they have to work in a certain way, but it just takes away that creative flow and the fun of it. And at the end of the day, you want to be obviously enjoying what you're doing. And like Daniel says here, obviously since he's working for a smaller size company in terms of like there's not so many of them, but because a lot of things are outsourced, aren't they, Daniel?
Some of it is, yeah.
Like that's like one of the things that I always think like a lot of students have to realize, that smaller studios are great. How am I wording this? Like, I think smaller studios are great because of the size, and getting that, I guess, that first step into the industry. And because so many artists want to get to a certain studio straight away. Like, for example, myself, I've always been, I guess, very picky, but I think it's just down to the fact that I've always wanted to get in film, and here in Scotland there's a bit more limitation towards that. However, I would definitely say to students who are listening who want to get into game, advertising and film, never shy away from like the name or the size of the company. Until you understand what the company is, until you understand what they do, what the people are like, always be open to exploring and trying these companies out. It's always a big thing I've always realised that a lot of students tend to make that mistake on, if that makes sense. Yeah, awesome. So obviously we've talked about deadlines, time management. I guess one of the other things I guess would be pretty cool is to talk about. Obviously we've kind of touched on it, but do you think talking about expectation would be another one in terms of like not being like for example like polygons, poly count and so forth. Like obviously like, there's a certain demands of like what they require in terms of quality, but is there anything that you've noticed that in terms of not being too precious upon? Is there anything that maybe saves you time, like you don't stress about because you're just like, that's not going to be seen? Is there anything that's came up?
Yeah. Sometimes, depending on the project, if we've got like a specific camera that's been locked off, then we'll know that stuff outside the camera doesn't need to be as detailed as the stuff in front of the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's a certain prop that is going to be very important to the scene, front and center, then that gets some more detail than stuff that's, in the background and not seen.
Awesome.
Sometimes it works where like a camera hasn't fully been decided yet, so you're not really sure exactly what. But it also depends on the project as well, because we've been doing a lot of VR stuff lately.
Right.
So with VR stuff, the user can look around 360 degrees.
Yep.
So you have to make sure everything stands up. Stuff that you would normally say that's never going to get seen, so we don't need to bother. Someone could look at it by turning their head left or something like that.
Yeah.
So you've got to consider kind of getting everything to the state where it needs to be, that it can hold up whenever the viewer is going to see it.
Mm-hmm. And I think, do you think approaching that same sort of mentality and focus is important also for portfolio, or would you always say portfolio is a different game in terms of you should just always aim for quality? Because obviously efficiency is very key, so like highlighting wireframes and so forth.
Mm-hmm. I think if you're going to show it in a portfolio, I think make sure it's looking good enough that you're happy with it, I think.
Because like when it comes to, I guess, like one of the mistakes when I was first early on starting in terms of trying to understand what studios were looking for, one of the main things I wasn't being clear about was how efficient I was, in terms of I was clearly always just showing rendering as, like, in terms of I would have like different beauty renders broken down into different camera shots, and I would obviously highlight maybe assets together and stuff, but I wasn't always being like clear on like how I did it, if that makes sense. And I think that plays a big part, as I've discussed in previous podcasts, and just overall when people talk about industry, is how efficient you work. And I think it plays just overall, it's massive, I guess.
Yeah, so when you say efficient, do you mean like...
I say like polygons, like poly count, like how you model things, how you understand. It's like what you just said there about the camera, like when things are necessary, because obviously there's deadlines and stuff that has to be achieved in a certain amount of time, and I guess highlighting like when, like where things are required, like for example texturing and stuff, like how big is your textures going to be? Is it really needed to be like 2K 4K textures, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So
yeah,
I'm not sure what your thoughts are on balance, I guess.
Yeah, so like kind of, again, it's one of these things that sort of depends on the project you're doing, because we've done stuff where we've done stuff like for mobile games where poly counts have been very strict.
Mm-hmm.
Like things like modeling a car and you're using a pentagon for a wheel.
Oh, right, okay.
Like really, really low poly.
Yeah.
And like textures like 256 by 256.
Gee whiz.
But then we've also done projects where we've been told there's pretty much no limit for polygons, and it's got 8K textures all over it.
Oh, I'd love
that.
that.
So it's from one extreme to the other, really, isn't it?
Definitely. And I think when it comes to portfolio, it also depends on how powerful your computer is. That's the other main discussion.
And the type of industry you're going for. If you're going for games, it's probably very important to show your wireframe and your poly count, but less so for poly count for pre-rendered high-res stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I see where you're coming from there. Totally agree. Awesome. So when it comes to, obviously, the main topic of the Student Art podcast, we always talk about education and so forth. So obviously I was able to send you a few questions, Daniel, of the main sort of topics I always bring up. And like I said on my podcast, there's certain reasons why I like to bring these questions into the podcast, because I think it makes it easier for students to understand what industry they're getting into, what information they need to know, I guess, to make their job easier just in general, and to help them get closer to their goal. So I guess obviously since we both went to the same college, it makes it a wee bit easier, so it always helps out.
That's good, yeah.
So, I guess we'll start off with the first question of: is there anything you wish you learnt when you were studying at college that maybe would have helped you a wee bit more when it comes to getting ready for the industry? Have you had the option to maybe add something onto that course?
So I guess our course, it had quite a lot of different aspects to it.
Mm-hmm.
It had I think I got mostly everything that I wanted out of it.
Yeah.
Maybe more of a focus on some of the aspects of the software, like different lighting techniques, maybe.
Okay.
Because that's the part that I think I'm probably struggling with most than anything else, was lighting.
Right.
Yeah, because I just don't enjoy it. I think that's all it is, really.
Right. Okay.
I don't enjoy lighting very much, but maybe some more. No, I think I got most of everything I wanted out of it. Obviously, it had parts I didn't enjoy so much.
Right.
Like drawing.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. If you like obviously there's I think sorry to cut you off, by the way. I wasn't trying to be rude.
No.
Like the one thing that I loved what Ian did, like obviously because Ian's a great lecturer, and he's always done his best to support everybody. And I think the hard part is because obviously, especially when you're in a college, like there's a difference between college and university. So if you're not, obviously since we live in Scotland, college and university in some places mean the same thing, whereas in Scotland they're kind of different. In terms of, like, obviously in college you may only have the option for a few lectures, like so one or two, whereas in university there's 20 to 30 in terms of maybe that course, if that makes sense. And one of the great things Ian did for us was Ian reached out to Daniel. So Daniel is also a teacher there now. Well, he's been there for 4 years. I say now, but you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, it's kind of just like a volunteer helping out thing for Ian.
And because of I think that's one thing I think lecturers should do more of, when they have the chance, is do what Ian's done, which is when, if you don't know something or you want to get the right information, Ian's always reached out to different people in the industry to come and do talks on a consistent basis. And what he did with Daniel was he brought Daniel in to teach as 3D and animation, and it was because of Daniel when it came to Maya and animation that I was able to learn tremendously from him. And like I said, it's, if education could start, I guess, being more, less afraid to reaching out to people, it'd be really helpful. Like obviously there's a lot of courses, like I was very lucky when I was at Abertay, like they had tons of things available, but it might not be the case anywhere else, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I'm not sure when it comes to what was I talking about? Oh yeah, I'm kind of leaning away. Oh yeah, so what did
what do we wish we learned when we were at college?
I think so. Like you're saying there about lighting and stuff. Like obviously it's a specific topic, but I think it's one that people shouldn't shy away from. Like it's also like you said about, like 2D wasn't necessarily your passion. It wasn't something that you'd really want to go for. But this could be a good question actually. It could be a very debatable one. But since you're mentioning 2D, do you think 2D helps you in any case when it comes to your workflow in terms of what you've needed to know?
Do you mean like sort of like the 2D drawing stuff and all that?
Yeah. So not in terms of like college, not in terms of what you learned in college, just in general. I mean, like, do you think it's helped with your like modeling and stuff?
I honestly don't think it has, because
okay.
I'm not going to lie, I can't draw.
Right.
My drawing is terrible. I have no desire to improve my drawing. I've never wanted to pick up a pencil and take it to a bit of paper.
Nope, I completely understand. Like I love drawing, but I understand in terms of like it's not for everyone, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because like we all have our own creative ways of getting to that final destination in terms of, like, if there's a 3D model you want to make, we all have our different ways of approaching it and approaching how to get it. And I think because I love drawing in terms of like I have huge respect for it and I understand its benefits, but I think there's also a point that you have to realize that if you're not so good at 2D and you're listening, it's not a requirement anymore. It used to be, I guess, a requirement in certain I guess how to phrase this. I guess the main way that 2D helps you, if you're not in university or college yet, is that it helps you get to those educational places in terms of it highlights a skill set for art, and maybe that might play a case in terms of if you're applying for university in the UK or wherever you are, showing that creative portfolio through 2D is important. But in terms of 3D, it's now not really important in terms of it's not going to be like be end. What's the phrase? Be all end all or whatever the phrase goes by.
Yeah, for a lot of those courses, when they ask for portfolios, they do ask for strong life drawing skills and all that kind of stuff.
Yep, totally. So obviously we've talked about, I guess, the first question. So what do you wish you learned at college? I think if I had to answer that sort of on my own as well, I'd say the only thing is, but this is me being selfish in the sense that because obviously you can only teach so much. Like it's the same thing at university as well. Like the lecturer has to obviously tailor it around everyone. While like because obviously there's not going to be 30 3D artists in that one class. There's not going to be 30 concept artists, so it's hard for them to balance it. But based on my own journey, I think I was like everything's been lucky. Like everything's been great in terms of how things have worked. But thanks for answering that. That's awesome.
Yeah, because with our course, there was quite a lot of different aspects to it. It kind of gave you a good overview of many different parts of the industry, because we had our 3D stuff, our animation stuff. We also had kind of a little bit of special effects and After Effects compositing and all that, didn't we?
Yeah, and that's another thing is like the editing. That's what helped me with my YouTube videos. Like
there was that. Yeah,
because like I never learned. Wait, what was the? I'm not sure what the module was called, but it's like do you know when we did the lightsaber editing?
Yeah, the special effects and compositing module.
Because like that one helped me a lot in terms of getting my roots, I guess, with like just getting a bit more confident with YouTube, because it at least gave me some sort of creative output to, I guess, deliver something that's decent.
Yeah, we also had a bit of photography as well.
What Oh, that wasn't in my, because remember I was 2 years after you.
Oh yeah, you did your first. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was just in first year.
I keep forgetting about that because obviously I jumped from college to college until I was able to get to Alberta.
That's right. Yeah.
No, but that's another thing is photography. I think I'm glad you brought it up. Is the idea of getting out more and getting better reference, because I think that's one of the main things when it comes to art. A lot of people are falling into the trap of, like, for example, people overuse like actual artists' work in terms of like for reference, and I think like obviously artist work is great and we respect, like, for example, this type of work that we're looking for, but you can't beat the reference from real life, if that makes sense. And I think, like, for example, photography is that outlet that you can use to really, like, for example, me and Daniel, we both love trains. Like, trains are awesome. Like, and
trains are all right. They're all right. Yeah.
What do you mean all right? You can't. Trains are cool, man. That's what my current project. And one of the main things I've done for my project, what have I done? I've went to like train stations to get reference, and use that as a foundation to help my work.
Yes, it's when you say about going to get reference. You might have seen on my ArtStation, Ross. There's a bus, kind of work in progress bus. Mm-hmm. I started this ages ago, but I never got around to finishing it. But I'll one day. But part of doing research for that is I went down. There was an open day at the bus depot in Edinburgh. So,
right, okay.
So I took my camera along there and I found this bus and I was just taking pictures. But I must have looked really weird to everybody else when I'm kneeling down in front of a wheel to take a photo of it and stuff like that.
No, that's the thing though. It's like the best thing one of the best things I've learned over, and it's only over the last few years that I've just completely just learned to ignore it, is that I don't care what people think when it comes to like just anything. When it comes to like my creative output, if this is going to help me improve as an artist, just do it. And get close to those nuts and bolts, get close to the rust, understand the textures, try and get a feel of it, and start exploring things. Try and get out more. It really helps as an artist, because I'm pretty sure you'll agree with this, Daniel. All of us artists are normally stuck inside.
Yeah, well, if someone got hold of my camera, they probably think I've got a fetish for buses or something.
Just constant images of trains and buses. Then again, can't go wrong with vehicle design. Like that's literally what I've been working on non-stop for the last few months. So
Yeah, I like doing vehicle stuff. I've got to finish it.
I'll hold you to it.
Yeah, you'll tell me off if I don't do it.
Yeah, you get in trouble. So obviously we've talked about the first question when it comes to studying in college and so forth. Obviously, since you've kind of answered this already, like what I was going to ask you next was, did college teach you how to be ready for the industry? We've kind of elaborated upon, but I guess how
they do try and emphasize how it's going to be.
Yeah, I think that. Well, on you go. I'm not sure.
And basically, like Ian MacArthur in particular, he's very vocal about how important it is to have good time management.
Mm-hmm.
When we're doing our projects, he's always making sure that we're following a schedule, because like the deadlines in college are nothing compared to the deadlines in the industry. In college, when we had our animation project, we're looking at it and it's something like, oh, you have it's January, you have to finish this project by February or March, whereas in the industry, you've got this environment, you have to finish it by next week, or you have this model, finish it by this afternoon.
Yeah, and like sometimes they can literally just tell you the next day as well, oh, we need it now, and it's like it's getting ready for that reality, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I think that's like that's why I wanted like that's why I do this podcast. It's like it's not to stress you out, it's not to make you scared. It's just to help you realize that at the end of the day, there's deadlines. Like obviously we have this awesome industry of being able to be creative and stuff, but at the end of the day, there's these things that you have to accomplish within a time frame and so forth, and they're highly important. I guess one of the topics, maybe we can discuss a wee bit when it comes to this question in regards to what did college, in terms of how it prepared you for the industry, is did networking and like communication that play a huge part, do you think, when it comes to getting into the industry and stuff and preparing for you? If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I got my first little kind of freelance gig was through someone that Ian at college knew, because he was looking for someone to do some 3D models. He designed kitchens, so he was looking for someone who could do a 3D model of a kitchen to show a client what their kitchen could look like.
Okay.
Because our lecturers, they know a lot of people in the industry, and they can put you in contact with people in the industry.
Yep.
But yeah, so I did some a little bit of freelance work for him, not much. It was before I kind of went on to interference pattern, but with college as well, you're working with like-minded people.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So yeah, I think it does help, because you're working with people who know people in the industry, and then they can help you. Even if they can't give you a job, they can give you advice on what people are looking for.
Yeah, because when it comes to obviously the idea of advice or the topic of advice, it's very important, and you want to get the right advice. And I guess one of the main things that I've always focused on was keeping my, obviously you have to be open to asking a lot of different types of people different questions, but you also have to be specific to the types of question you're asking and the type of people you're asking, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I have, for example, with me, I have two mentors who I have always gone to, in terms of, right, these people are in the creative industry, or for example, for me, it's film. So these two people have both been in film, and obviously one of the guys also done games and stuff, but I've always gone to them for advice, and I've tried to focus, I've tried not to reach out to too many people, because that's also one of the traps that we fall into, is that we ask far too many people for advice. Yeah. And that then contradicts everything, because everyone's telling you something different.
Yeah. So, and you touched on it earlier as well, that in these courses, sometimes they bring in people from the industry to come in and give talks, and even look at students' work and give feedback on the work as well. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, have you noticed people are quite scared to ask questions?
Oh yeah, exactly. That's another thing I was going to bring up. So when I came down to do the presentation, was it this year or last year?
Yeah, it was just a couple of months ago, wasn't it? A few months ago.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So last year. Sorry, I'm falling short of time frame Like, I've literally just been doing 3D for non-stop.
Yeah.
Have not been focused at all. Yeah. So I went down to do a presentation. Like Daniel was saying just a few months ago, and we were discussing. We were just having dinner together. Me, Daniel, and Ian just having a catch up and stuff, and we were talking about. People don't always like a lot of. I guess maybe it's just me, but it feels like a lot of art students are afraid to. I guess just talk to people or try and I guess socialize a wee bit more, and like they're a bit more. Is it introvert? Is that the right word?
Yeah, I think I'm probably guilty of that too.
But and there's nothing wrong with that. It's completely okay. It's just down to, I guess, like for example, when I was doing the presentation, I guess I've always had a like I could always tell what type of person I'm pretty good at judging a person, just by talking to them in a few seconds or just by glance, just trying to see what like who's the confident type of person, who's going to be kind of open to discussion and stuff. And this is also an important part when it comes to teachers and stuff, is having the ability to be patient with students and understand what type of student they are. So if they are maybe quite shy and maybe they take criticism quite harshly, or they struggle with maybe certain feedback, it's like you as a teacher being able to, I guess, approach them in a way that helps them progress. I'm not sure if there's anything you want to talk about when it comes to asking questions and stuff, Daniel.
Yeah, well, you also have to understand as well, for a lot of people in a college course, sometimes it's their very first ever foray into 3D, and it is a very complex thing to pick up if you've never done it before.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have to be very patient.
Very true.
It's difficult, isn't it?
It's one of those things. It's like I think everyone always thinks they have to get somewhere so quickly, but there's no rush. Like obviously we all want to be great at something. We want to enjoy what we do, and we want to get to the job in a certain amount of time or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, it takes time. It's a process. And
well, yeah, was it you that was saying it? I was speaking to somebody, and they were saying that there's people who are kind of very like brand new to 3D, but they're comparing their work and they're feeling bad because they're comparing it to someone that's been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah. It probably was me, because what was it? What was I saying? I think we were talking about this. I'm not. Was it maybe when I was down in Edinburgh?
Yeah, it might have been.
Basically, what was happening was, for example, I was surrounded by a group of people. I think it was at university and so forth, and like a lot of people were complaining. I guess personally about the quality of their own work, but then they weren't taking into consideration like they weren't being realistic, and like they were overstressing about the fact that like their work wasn't good enough, and they were comparing themselves to people who've been in the industry for so long. And it's just like, you do realize that these people have been spending years to get good at something, and there's no need to stress about it. Even I used to be this type of person. I've always focused on hard work. I praise people who work hard, but I also understand that patience is a huge part in this industry, because it doesn't happen overnight. It's the same with anything in life, as corny as it may sound, but it's all down to working hard, being persistent, being consistent, understanding the ins and outs of things. And like Danny was saying there, it's like you just can't be. You have to be, I guess, more open. I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because like before I went to college, I had done very, very little 3D. I'd kind of like opened Blender one time and looked at it and then closed it, or I tried. There was a program called, it was an old kind of program called Bryce. It was for landscape generation. Bryce. I remember playing about with that, but not knowing how it worked. But that was my only kind of look at 3D before doing the course. So my first proper 3D stuff was in college.
Right, awesome.
What about you? Was it before you went to college? Were you doing 3D as well, or were you?
Well, when it came to me getting introduced to art, I got really obsessed into 3D because of the film Tintin. One of my main, I guess, interests has always been Steven Spielberg. I've always had a massive passion for his films, the way he delivers story and so forth. And because he was working alongside one of my other main idols, which is Peter Jackson, I was like, happy days. Two of my idols in the industry are working together, and so I did graphic communication in secondary school. So I worked with a software called Inventor, Autodesk Inventor.
Okay.
And that's when I first started out. And because of, I guess, learning this, it's what got me into exploring the industry and stuff. And I came across Tintin, and I was watching how they made the film. And like it was this one really cool scene that was basically showing. It was a guy. Do you know when they're wearing the suits for mocap?
Yeah.
And basically it was showing both two screens, so him walking with the green screen surrounding him, and then on the other screen was the 2D and 3D models moving in the actual film, like in like the engine.
Yeah.
And it was just then that I was like, yep, 3D for life, never going back. I was like, I'm geeking out non-stop. I'm not caring what anyone says. My whole life is 3D from now on. Like, I even got to a point that I was like talking to my friends just for the laughs in Polygon, where we were just like, I can see this whole street lined up with like squares and triangles. I was just going crazy about it. That's me just being me. But yeah, that's how I got into 3D. And as we were discussing about the main topic of like not caring what people think, it's important. Like, not, you have to enjoy life. You got to go and have fun with it. Obviously, you want to maintain focus and make sure you get the work done. Make sure you have that right mindset, because that's where a lot of people fall short, is that mindset, and having that work ethic, I guess. So that's, yeah, awesome. I guess the next question we'll talk about is, let's see. Well, we kind of talked about this one. So instead, we'll transfer over to the main question, Daniel.
Okay.
And I'm not, like I said in previous podcasts, everyone's already said the same thing, but maybe you might have a different answer to this, or maybe you'll say the same thing, but you'll approach it differently. So, Would you recommend, based on your own knowledge, that college is like, would you recommend college over online courses? Basically, what I'm trying to say in terms of what you know, or like what's the best way you can maybe answer this kind of question? I know it depends based on the fact that obviously it depends on your situation and if you've experienced maybe an online course before, but I'm not sure if there's anything maybe you could talk about the advantages of going to college over maybe courses, online courses.
So I think for me, I think it was the right decision to go to college. I think for me, it helps. It gives you focus. It gets you out and gets you spending time with people who are also interested in the subject. Okay. I think it is possible to sort of self-teach this kind of thing, or do online courses, because there are some great ones out there. The internet is full of them as well. But yeah, for me, I think it was the right decision to go to college. I think for me, it gives you discipline to get things done, and it gives you experience of working to deadlines and hand-in dates and all that.
Yeah,
albeit much more relaxed deadlines compared to the industry. But I think if you're doing it kind of like self-taught or online courses, one of the advantages that college has as well is if you don't have a tutor who you're seeing every day and looking at your stuff and seeing how you work, then it can be quite easy to pick up bad habits that could be ironed out by a lecturer if they can give real-time feedback and give you direct answers to your questions. So I think for me, I'm glad I went to college. I think it helps with my motivation as well. I think if I was at home doing an online course, I would get very distracted very easily.
Yeah.
But I think in this industry, I think what really matters is probably less so much the qualification, but more how good your reel or your portfolio is, I think. Because if you have a great portfolio and you can demonstrate that you can do the work, then I think your qualifications won't matter so much.
I completely agree, because it's like oh, I can hear myself. Whoa.
Oh, are you echoing?
Yeah, I was hearing. I think we're good. Yeah, I was like, it's like, what's going on here? It's Inception. No, I completely agree. I know it's like a lot of people might question sometimes why I ask this, but I think the reason why I've always asked this question is because it's like it's based off your situation, and I always like to be clear and honest with everyone as possible, and that's why I get on a lot of different, like that's why I've brought on a vast range of different artists, and I wanted to be as honest as possible and get their honest opinion on like their experience and what's going to help you propel yourself forward, if that makes sense. Like I think it's all about being as clear and concise, because if you live in a country that maybe is not as fortunate, for example, as ourselves, or maybe for example it's more expensive, which is obviously normally one of the main topics, which is for example certain places charge way more than I guess even like what they even should. Like some places aren't even worth going to, and that's why I always say to people, really do research before you apply for something, because you won't be losing money, you won't be taking out loans or being taken advantage of, and it's really down to being able to just explore and be absolutely honest with yourself, and try and figure out what's the best thing for you. Like if you don't know what's best for you, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's down to, I guess, like this podcast is here to help you, I guess, get a clearer understanding of the different paths that these artists take. And like Daniel said here, college has benefited him. It's helped him and supported him get where he wanted to go, and it's great. And that's why I've always asked this question, because I'm not saying there's anything wrong with online courses. I think a lot of them are great, but there's a lot of things that they just can't provide you that college do and universities do.
Yeah, because it's a big decision, isn't it? Because a lot of my classmates, they decided to go on to university after college. I didn't want to apply. I just didn't want to go forward to university. I wanted to just try and find work in the industry.
Yep. Because like, I think everyone has this. I have no idea who's ingraining it into their heads. Maybe it's secondary school. It's when they get into secondary school, but it feels like there's this forced idea that education is the end all of everything. Like it's the thing that determines your life. I don't think it's the case. I think it's down to just like, for example, obviously it depends if you're in, like, for example, if you're studying maths or whatever, like something very specific that needs a university degree, that just is essential. But when it comes to the creative industries, like we're saying, like you don't need like a certain degree. Like for example, I went to university, and I got the best degree I could get from a university. So I was fortunate enough to get a first class honours. I just, like, obviously I'm not trying to be like ego, but I worked hard and stuff. But that's not helped me get a job. But it's also one thing to say that it's not benefiting though, because like they will look at my CV and maybe be like, okay, he shows that he can work. That's maybe and that's the benefit of getting that degree. He shows that he can work within a team. That's the benefit of going to college and university. So I guess that's like when, for example, Danny, you're saying that you want to get a job, you just straight away, and the main thing that they clearly obviously based your work on was the portfolio. So,
So because I sent in my portfolio, and then they invited me in just for a chat about it. So I went in and talked about it, but it wasn't until about maybe about 6 months after that before I actually got a job in the industry. Because it was an interference pattern that got in touch with me after about a few months after I had the meeting about my portfolio, and they said they've got some freelance work available. It was just like 2 weeks on a project to see how I go. So I went in, and then I was there for a couple of weeks on a project, and then that finished. But then that led to more and more projects and bigger and bigger projects.
And it's kept growing ever since.
Yeah. It's about 90% of my work is there.
Awesome. And that's a good thing as well, because obviously since you enjoy it, it makes it easier, doesn't it? It just makes it it makes it way easier. Like you can just well, that's where the work's coming from. Then just keep going for it. Because I know also, like you guys sometimes obviously work with Axis. Is that correct?
We have had some projects from Axis, yeah.
Yeah. So like,
I don't think I'm allowed to say which ones though.
Oh no, of course it's okay. I won't. I won't ask you. I wouldn't ever do that. But that's like another benefit of going to certain studios as well, is that you're getting the benefit of being in a smaller environment, so you're going to be more relaxed, less stressed. Also, it depends on obviously the workload and stuff, but you'll also be able to get a taster of working with other companies as well, through outsourcing and so forth. So that's another benefit of doing that. But yeah, no, that's awesome. We've covered a lot of awesome topics today, and a lot of different topics as well, which I'm really glad we dwelled into. I'm not sure, is there anything you want to maybe bring up that you think might benefit the podcast at all, in terms of maybe something you'd like to share? If there's not, it's cool, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I just think if you're looking to go in the industry, I think just spend a lot of time getting a portfolio that's showing off what you want to show off. I think, whether you're going for games, movies, kind of work on personal projects, and get stuff to a state that you're happy to show off. I think. Awesome. Which, I need to spend more time on my personal projects. As Ross, you'll know that I start things and then start other things before finishing those things.
Yeah, well, maybe that's another thing that's good to bring up in terms of like for example, is when it comes to portfolio, is like finishing things.
Yes.
I know it's cliche. It's cliche based off exactly what you just said. I'm just trying to be nice. I'm not trying to be harsh.
No, I know.
It's weird. So I'm not sure. So me and you have like the opposite sort of way of, like, we have the same sort of, I wouldn't say it's an issue, but it's like we have two different approaches. So my approach is that, so I'm so obsessed with getting things so perfect and so I guess physically accurate to the real world. Like, I will go so in depth in terms of, like, I'll get tons of reference, and then try and model everything until my computer explodes. Like that's my mentality. However, the downside to that is, like we discussed earlier, is understanding what's needed and what's not needed. And then Daniel's point there is, when it comes to creating a portfolio and creating a piece, it's down to getting that, I guess, mindset of just trying to finish something. And I think sometimes when it comes to portfolio, like, obviously when you're in the industry, it's harder to work on personal stuff. But I think the one thing that makes it easier is obviously doing something that you enjoy. And one of the things that also I'm going to ask everyone to do, would be much appreciated. Make sure to check out Daniel's art station. Daniel makes some awesome work. One of my favourite pieces is his Wacky Races piece that you'll see going on in the slideshow and so forth. He's also working on a few personal projects. One of them's a Robot Wars piece. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Robot Wars, so I'm working on a model of Matilda from Robot Wars.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see that.
I'm planning on doing all the insides as well, but it's just finding time to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always that whole, I guess, discussion of time. It plays a huge part, but you always have to obviously prioritize what you need to get done with work and stuff. But yeah, like I said, so anyone who's listening, check out Daniel's art station. So Daniel Conner and art station. I'll add the link in below. On the slideshow above, or highlighted in the video. If you're not listening, well, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the slideshow. If you're listening on any other platforms such as Anchor, Spotify, and so forth, I'll also add it in the description there below as well. Is there any other things you'd like is there anything else you'd like to share, Daniel, when it comes to, I guess, social media, or is ArtStation your main one?
ArtStation is my main one. I have a Twitter with no tweets, so that's probably pointless.
That's right. I'll make sure to add that for you, though, the ArtStation. But thank you so much once again for coming on. It means a lot.
No problem. Thank you for having me, Ross.
Anytime, man. And once again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys later. Bye for now.
See you later.
I say thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Ross Baxter's YouTube channel for excellent tutorials and podcasts.